Everyone, great to see you all. I think we are ready to start. 301, let's give it another 10 seconds, but I think we're good. Cool. Do you want to say an opening or just jump in? Yeah, cool. Nice to meet you all. So this is our third webinar. I'm Jonathan Gober, in charge of the sales engineering team at Port. Every 2 weeks, we're doing some webinars. Sometimes we're doing like very 101 webinars, like onboarding for the first time, like today. Some other sessions, we're doing just more open format or specific to focusing on a specific use case. If you have suggestions, if you have needs, if you have topics that are of interest, feel free to share them in the community Slack or even here in chat. So we're happy to tune and to adapt the sessions and the topics to what you need. Cool. So I see that quite a few people joined already. So let's get started. Just to set the agenda for today, we're going to go through. You can hear me fine, right? Let's just maybe have a quick yes in the chat. I'm just not seeing, where do I see the chat? 1 second, let me just see that I see the chat and the Q&As. Yeah, if you can just maybe just say hi in the chat just to make sure that you can all see it and you all see the Q&A. That would be amazing. Cool. So it will be a very interactive session. These are sessions in small forums. What I will do just for 2 minutes, I'll set the scenes and remind on the key principles of Port. And we are going to onboard Port from scratch. So we're going to onboard Port from scratch. What I'm going to do is integrate with the GitHub, ingest a few repositories, create the first dashboard, and I'm going to manually create another blueprint with some other metadata and explain what I'm doing on the way to really explain the principles of Port from scratch. And then we will have this should take about up to 20 minutes, and we'll have time for open questions. So if you have questions, if there are things that you want to ask, like this is really, we can make it very interactive. So feel free to be ready with questions and to drop them. You can even drop them from now already, and we can address them either part of the demo or later. Cool. So let's go. Let's go and let me share my screen. So 2 slides and then we'll just go live. In Port as a high level, just to explain our architecture. So Port is an open IDP, an open dev portal. Open in a lot of ways. In our culture, in our openness, you can access a free demo, you can create a free account. Open in the community that we build. So you can join our Slack, ask each other questions, try to help everyone. And open also in how extensible is the domain. So the principle of Port is to ingest data from a lot of sources from the right into the portal and create views that will be tuned for different personas, whether they are developers, AppSec, CISO, so maybe for an VP of engineering, I would like to create views of cost, of teams efficiencies, of a project, maybe initiatives or project we are running. For developers, I want to maybe show a deep dive into 360 view per service. So what is a service, where it is running, what vulnerabilities sit on it, but just maybe specific to the developer. Okay, and all this is being enforced with role-based access control, so I can create custom views while building a single developer portal. So the equivalent of, how it works, it's every data that we're going to ingest works in 3 phases. Phase 1, and this will be the last slide, and we just go hands-on and create it from scratch. We're creating a data model, a schema. Okay, schema is a template. Think of an empty Excel with just a table that is ready with no data yet. I'm creating a schema, I'm getting ready to get some data, and I'm defining, in this example, a repository schema, inside which I will have a few properties, maybe a description, a language. I can have a user schema where I can have the name, the email, permissions. I can have maybe a Jira schema with the ticket number and priority and things like this. Okay, so anything can be a schema. We call it a blueprint at Port. Number two, we're ingesting data. We're sending data from a data source. It can be an app, it can be an exporter like Ocean, or it can be just a webhook or any custom data. And last, we're sending data. We're ready to receive the data, but we just need to map it out. We need to say this metadata goes into this bucket. So we just need to translate them. So this is called mapping the data. So we're going to, in a YAML format, we're just going to say this data goes here, this data goes there. In most of the case, for every off-the-shelf integration, we're doing it for you. You don't need to worry about that. But if you want to extend, if you want to customize, or if you want to bring your own data model, you can do it with Port. Cool. I hope it's clear. If you have questions, just again, we can make it interactive. Feel free to jump in the chat and ask questions. So what I'm going to do is share, and I'm going to create. So what I did just before the meeting, I created an account. I went to the website. Let me just show it from scratch. So I went to get Port, and I said, I want to get started for free. I want to create a new account, and I created a new account from there. And it takes me to this onboarding view. So what I'm doing, I'm putting my name. Okay. I'm going to give my organization a name. So maybe John Webinar. So that's the name of my organization. And now I'm invited to add teammates. Maybe I want to invite Ronnie to join me into my organization, but Ronnie, you will forgive me. We're not going to invite you today. It will be for next time. And I'm going now to ingest my first data, which is one of the Gits, which is usually where customers start. You don't have to do it. You can also skip and integrate with others, but we highly recommend you follow those guides. Today we'll do it with GitHub, which is super comfortable. It relies on the app. I'm going to connect to my organization, install the app. I'm going to ingest data from all the repos. It takes 1-2 minutes. What is happening behind the scenes? If you remember what I showed, that number one, it's creating a data model. Number two, we're ingesting data from the app. And number three, it's doing the mapping. So this is what's happening behind the scenes. And you can see the magic happening. And my org is ready. So what do I have here? I have just a homepage that explains a few things that I can fully customize. I can see my catalog that was created. I can see my services. See my repos were ingested. I can see my service catalog dashboard, and I can see a production readiness dashboard with a few scorecards, and I'm going to explain them deeper dive. I can see a few self-service templates are ready for me to use and ingest. And last, I can see that I have in the builder, and that's where we're going to play today. I can see that I have my first blueprint. Remember the blueprint? So what I showed just here, this is my first blueprint. I have a service blueprint with a few properties, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with the tier, with the README, with the language. So let's take a look at a sample dashboard, and I can see that I have indeed my team, identifier, URL, Slack, and I can configure them from here. I can ingest them from GitOps and enrich these services I want. Okay. So at the moment, I have a very simplistic catalog with a single data source and a single blueprint. So let's make it a little bit more compelling and start to enrich it with other data. So I'm doing it from scratch to really explain how it's done. So remember, we have the blueprint that we created. So I can create an additional blueprint here. I can edit my blueprint here. And I can see the data source, which is GitHub. And in the data source, I can see that I have a single mapping. Okay, the only mapping that I have is for the blueprint called service. So what I'm going to do now is to create another blueprint where I'm going to add my workflows or pull requests. So let's do it together. I am going into Port's documentation, into ingest data into the catalog. And what I'm going to do is that in GitHub, I'm looking for other examples. So Port is telling me you can ingest pull request blueprint if you want, or ingest some workflows and workflow runs, for example. So this is actually of interest. I want to see, thinking of my boss asked me to create some DORA metrics. So I want to create some dashboards, seeing all the repos that I have, the workflows that they have, and the workflow run, success, failures. So thinking maybe DORA metrics. Or I want to create a view for developers where they can track the progress of a deployment, showing them, okay, for every new deployment that you have in Jenkins, in GitHub, I want to present you where how it's going. So let's do it. Repository, we have it already. Okay, it's called just service here. We just have a generic name. So we just close GitHub. So we have our first blueprint here. I have one that is called service. In this case, this one is called GitHub repository. So I'm going to ignore it. What I want to create now is a workflow blueprint. So I'm going to copy the JSON and I'm just going to create it manually. And instead of, I can either do it with the UI or I can do it over JSON. Let's be lazy and just copy paste the JSON. The only thing that I need to change is that my target blueprint is service, if you remember, as default. And I just replace my target blueprint. So the relation between the workflow to the repository will be defined here. And you can see that I have my blueprint called GitHub workflow, and I have a few properties: updated ad, created ad, status, and so on. I'm going to save it. Nice. So you can see I have a nice blueprint connected to service, and the properties that we saw are here. Okay, let's do the same with workflow run. So I'm going to take a second one, copy it, create another blueprint. Here I won't need to change the relation because the target is the same as the default, which is workflow. And we should be with 3 blueprints. So what is left to do? I have my templates, I have my data model. I just need to push data to it now, right? If you remember, so I'm sending data because I'm having the app. So the app is sending data all the time, but we don't know where to send it, how to map it into the blueprint. So I just need now to create the dictionary to say this goes there. So I will use it from the examples and prepared for me some templates. I can see the mapping from the repository into the service or GitHub repository blueprint. I don't need it because I have it already. What I'm going to add are the workflows and the workflow runs. Okay, so I'm just going to copy paste and take the whole part of what I'm missing here. Up. Sorry. The workflows and the workflow runs. Let's do it this way. Da, 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 da. Okay, just up the way to here. Yeah. Workflow runs, the workflow runs. I'm going to the data source. I'm going to the GitHub, and the only thing that I need to do is just add the extra mapping. So mapping the workflow runs and mapping the GitHub workflows. Okay, and that should be it. Let's just save and resync. So what we are doing now is send the mapping, and in a few minutes, we're going to see some extra mapping appearing. And if we go here, I can see workflows and workflow runs, and you can see that it's ingested successfully. So I can see my workflows, and I can see the runs and the status, whether they were successful or failed. Nice. I can even group by just to see, maybe I want to show a different view. I will say add a group by conclusion, and I will be able to see my workflows group by success or failures. I can group them by team, or can group them by all kind of nice views. If I want to create maybe a pie chart out of this criteria, I could go into maybe my service dashboard and create a new pie chart and just say workflows status ratio, for example. I would create just maybe a nice icon. And I could say pie chart showing the success failure of my pipelines. The blueprint would be the workflow run, and the breakdown, if you remember, would be conclusion. I can add filters. I can filter dynamically based on my teams or based on me, so I can go more advanced so that it's more relevant. But just for the sake of the demo, I'm just going to create a simple one. Let's just put it here so that it looks nice. Yep. And I can have a nice one with view. Cool. From what I showed, you can extend it to anything you want. You can ingest it to Jira's. You can connect it to, you can really create your own views and your own dashboards. The last thing I want to present, and then we're going to move into a Q&A and try to leave it, create an open interactive session. We are our scorecards. So out of the box, my service came up with scorecards. If you remember in the view here, I could see that I got a few scorecards that were created, and where Port is telling me is checking if my repos have a README or have a supported language. So we said my DevOps team said supported language in our organization is maybe Node.js and Java, but the rest are not supported, and I want to have an alert. Or I want to make sure that there is an owner, like every repo has a team configured, has a tag, has some metadata. So we created a few scorecards, and I can see them summarized here, and I can see repo by repo who passed and who failed and who reached basic, silver, bronze. How are they created? If you go back to the builder, a scorecard is always associated into blueprints, but you can also bring data from other blueprints that will fill this view. So I can see that the production readiness scorecard is made out of 3 criteria for bronze, silver, and gold. And you can see that the bronze has a README, the silver has a supported language, and the gold has a team. And you can see them all. Let's have a look at the formula. So you can see here we're checking the has README, bronze is not empty, and this is how I'm checking the scorecards. Cool. Let me take just a quick break, making sure that you're all still with us, and maybe I can start answering a few questions. So anything, maybe I will ask start with the first question. Who has never, where are you in your pod journey? Have you got to where I'm showing? Like, have you ever created a free account and created something? Is it your very, very first time that you're seeing pod? And please write in the Q&A in the chat, and let's see the answers. Cool. So answers are coming. Some of you are trying for the first time. I think someone who has already an account and someone is a commercial account. I recognize the name. Cool. Anything particular that you would like to ask in during the session? Anything that you about could be basic, could be advanced, anything that can help with in your onboarding with bot? No. Cool. Someone is asking about GitLab, the difference with GitLab and Bitbucket. So let me just explain. If you remember during the onboarding, in the data source, I was offered 3 options: GitHub, Bitbucket, and GitLab. Bitbucket and GitHub rely on an app. So it's super comfortable. You follow the guide, and we're installing an app behind the scenes in Bitbucket and GitHub. In GitLab, we're using an exporter. So it's a little bit different. What we have is you just use a Helm chart. And with this command, so you see that it's giving you to use the ID, secrets, and so on. And what you can do is basically and you're going to put your token, your GitLab token, that is here. You deploy it in your premise, in the environment of your GitLab. And what it's going to do is you're going to create, let me just show it here. It's going to create an exporter connected to GitLab that is sending metadata out. You don't need any ingress connectivity to bring in data. Outgress only is enough. So you don't need particular approvals from my tiers or for approvals maybe, but no need for opening ports or opening IPs. It's just an outbound only connectivity. So that's the difference. Azure DevOps, we also have an integration using webhooks, and we actually have an Ocean base. I don't want to expand too much into what is Ocean, but Ocean-based integration that is coming at the end of this week for Azure DevOps. So that's about the question on the difference with the GitLab and Bitbucket. Cool. Any other question? Anything else from the team? No? Cool. Something maybe about other data source. So let's browse. So you have a few data sources that you can see here that are guided, okay, how to install Argo CD, Kubernetes, another source of data. What we have here, Ocean-based integrations, they are not the only ones you can ingest anything. Okay, so if you want to ingest just something we don't know, maybe you have a feature flag management tool in-house that you want to ingest import, you can rely on webhooks or you can rely on CI and push the data to pod. If it's a data that we don't know, we're just going to follow this 1, 2, 3 model. For most of the integrations that you will find in this page, you just follow the guides and you can install basically anything from here. Cool. So that's the yeah. So just giving a minute for questions. If not, I will show the self-service, how to set up self-service. Any other question that someone has? You can also ask like custom questions, like things that are not really related to onboarding. That's fine. Yeah, this is well, not too many, so don't hesitate to ask custom questions. Cool. So self-service. You can see that out of the box, we created a few self-services, basically templates. Behind the scenes in a self-service, so what we are doing here is that we're creating an action, a request that instead of being a ticket is basically a closed loop action that is available to the developers, where we're creating a form where they can fill the data that they want. This form is super easy. It's just asking for the name, but you can go much more advanced. Port is handling the form. You can have drop-downs from the catalog, like which repos. You can select entities. You can have advanced relationship in the form. We manage role-based access control, who can make a request, approvals, and things like this. And behind the scenes, if you want to create your first action, you need to make it ready. The easiest is to start with the GitHub action, but you can start from anything, even if it's a CI that is not listed here. You're going to use Kafka. You can ping us for that. And what you're going to do is that you're going to add your org name. You're going to add the repository where the CI job resides. You don't need to put a token because we have a GitHub app set up, so we know how to associate the two. And the name of the action that is associated to the scaffolding. We have a few templates. Okay, so if you just want to try something out of the box, you can go into port, create self-service actions, and you will see a few examples here in the backend, and you can see a few examples from a few pipelines. So you can just go into examples and pick a few that are here. My recommendation, if it's your very first time, just follow the guides. We have a guide, just, for example, scaffolding a self-service is going to take you through every step, like create the form, create the backend and everything. So this is a really good way to start. And that's how to trigger to create an action. So there's another question that came up. Is it possible to trigger deployment through Argo CD with port? Yes, absolutely. The answer is yes. So you can trigger any job in port. The best practice is just also for security reasons, you don't want to give us tokens on access to all your systems. So remember, we are exporter only. So you have exporters, you're sending us metadata. How to trigger actions? You can do it in two ways, either with a CI or with a Kafka. To trigger deployment, the recommendation would be to actually use the CI behind the scenes. So basically, to answer your question, how to trigger the deployment through Argo CD. So basically, it's a very common use case. I want to deploy, we have a customer who has scaffolding WordPress a lot. They're doing a lot of e-commerce, and they want to do it end to end. In a single CI job, in a single self-service, they're doing creating the repo, putting a CI, pushing it into Argo CD, and all the way to the cloud in AWS. After 5 minutes, the website is ready in AWS, and they can configure their WordPress. So what you would do to do what you want in the CD, you would create a CI job that coordinates and orchestrates that behind the scenes. How to achieve that? Just try to break up the steps that you would do to deploy your application on Argo CD and just create a template or put it as a template where port is going to pass as JSON the payload of what is desired. Okay, so for example, you want to pick up in Argo CD which application is going to be deployed and in which cluster maybe. So you're going to decide in a dropdown, picking up from the catalog. So for example, in the user form, what I can do, if I'm assuming that this action is deploying it to the cloud, I can create a new input that will say AWS region or which repository, for example, application that I want to app to deploy. Okay, and what I can do, I can create as a type, I want to select this as an entity, and as a blueprint, I would say the service. So basically what I'm going to do in my template, I'm going to have now a drop-down where I can pick services that I have in my catalog to be deployed into my Argo CD and my app. Did I answer the question? Is it clear? Yeah. Amazing. Amazing. Any other
Why
anything
would
else?
I need a
When you to use ClickUp to yeah, it's an excellent question. So I will read out the question. Why is would I need a Kafka to use a GitLab pipeline? So you have two options to trigger a pipeline. Remember I said we don't need any ingress connectivity to your network. Okay, so let me show again how we work. You're going to have exporters and send the data out. So security-wise, it's great. I don't need any ingress connectivity. But what about triggering as a service action? I need to trigger something, right? So the only exception to that is to trigger as a service action. But even there, maybe security teams will not be happy to have us having ingress access to your pipeline directly and trigger it. So an alternative to create, to connect, to open us and direct access to your pipeline to GitLab is to read the topic from Kafka. So what we're going to create is a topic dedicated to you. And every time someone triggers a job, so you're going to have a client that is polling it all the time. And if someone triggers a job, it's going to pick the job and actually trigger the pipeline. So what we're giving you is an agent that resides on premise. This agent will trigger the GitLab pipeline internally, and it's polling the Kafka topic. You don't need to use a Kafka topic. It's whatever is most convenient. Either way is fine. So either the Kafka topic or you can use a direct connectivity. Both are totally fine. Let me just take the glass of water. Yeah, thanks. Okay, so these are the alternatives. It's a direct pipeline trigger or read from a port Kafka topic, which is the most generic. Both are fine. If you need, if you want the Kafka topic, you don't need this. You need to ping us. You need just to ping the team. It's not open by default. Commercial customers all have it. If you want to have an evaluation of port and you need this, ping us and we can open it for you. The Kafka topic, you don't need to write the client. We have templates that are open source for that. Cool. Let me see if there are other questions. Right. There's a question about the cost. Which cost provider do we provide? So you can ingest anything, but we have out-of-the-box integrations with AWS costs, Cube costs, and Open costs. So you can follow the guides here that they're going to take you through integrations of costs. So the cost use case is really, really interesting. We're actually adding it to the public demo as well very soon. Because in AWS Cost Explorer, you have the cost of a resource, you have a cost of a Kubernetes, of an S3 bucket. Okay, it's nice. But maybe you want to show the cost based on a team or based on a product or based on something else. So import, because we have a lot of source of truth, we can connect the cost to the resources, to the teams, so to different blueprints. You can make sense of costs in and you can cut it in different ways that are more of interest, so you can be more flexible. So it's everything around ownership, around tagging, around teams will be very convenient to cost. I had a customer who was saying, oh, but we don't want to show it to cost. And his manager was saying, no, actually, on the contrary, the problem today is that developers, they don't want to spend a lot of money. They just have no awareness of what things cost. I remember myself in my previous company, I got picked by called by the VP R&D who said, hey, Jonathan, do you need this cluster? It costs us $1,000 a month. I said, no, not at all. I'm sorry for that. I had no idea. I just created a cluster for a demo and I left it open. I had no idea how much it costs and it costs a fortune. So I think if we presented every developer, look at how much your services cost or your dev environment costs, that would be really useful. So it's a very nice integration. Open cost, Cube costs are open source tooling. AWS cost relies on AWS Cost Explorer service that you need to have open. Cool. So thanks for asking. Any other question? No, I will ask another question. Anything that any topic, we're looking for topic for the next webinar in 2 weeks. It would be US hours, but it would be afternoon, not too late for Europe if you're in Europe. And it's recorded. Anything that would be of interest, we can go deep dive in a specific use case. It could be security, AppSec, it can be cost, it can be scaffolding, anything that would be of interest. So feel free to vote and put it in the chat. So that would be help us actually influence the next webinar. If not, we're going to pick up ourselves. So any thoughts, anything that you would love to be covered as a deep dive in the next webinar, feel free to write in the chat. Cool. Thanks very, very much for joining. This call we'll be going to share the recording in our webinars in Slack in the website. You can come back and share with teams. If there are other questions, we're available in Slack. Just go to the community help channel, and we are here to help.
Oh, there is a question.
There is another question. Sorry. Kubernetes resource creation. So I'd love to see an end-to-end demo, which is already configured, like the demo with a guided walkthrough of what could be done. Okay, perfect. So let me copy paste this request. Can you copy paste? Yeah, we'll copy paste so that we keep a track on it. Perfect. We'll share with this. Kubernetes resource creation. Yeah, how do we create a Kubernetes resource? So in general, the use case of resource creation is, it's depends on how you work, but if you work with cloud and Terraform or Pulumi or kind of ISC, basically what I can recommend is the following. Let me actually show you into a guide that is going to take you step by step. So we usually do not recommend, depends on how you work. Yeah, we usually do not recommend to create the resource directly because you want it to be managed. So you want it to be tracked by code. So what a fantastic guide is to take, after you logging into Port for the first time, you follow the self-service guide, just integrate with GitLab or Bitbucket or GitHub as a self-service. Once you're done, you can follow any of these guides. And you have a guide that is about creating a cloud resource, but it's exactly the same idea. It's creating a cloud resource using IC. Same idea as creating a Kubernetes resource. Okay, it's exactly the same. And you can follow this guide. It's going to take you step by step. Basically, what we do is that we're going to use cookie cutter to create a template. In this case, we have an IC template. Let me show it to you. We're going to have a GitHub action that is going to edit a S3 bucket template. That's the cloud resource. S3 bucket template, a cloud resource that we're going to customize and put it as a PR. The PR is going to be merged automatically and then pushed into a basically into the cloud resource. And what you can do is replace this into the resource that you want, such as a Kubernetes resource or workload or things like this. So you can easily deploy it in create a Kubernetes resource. It's super, super common. What is really nice is also to follow this guide is, first of all, as a visibility to show the repositories and where, in which Kubernetes service they run on. So you can also, this is a very nice guide to follow. So once you follow the self-service onboarding, you can take any of these guides in any order that you want and help you build it. If you want us to go deeper, we're happy to also host it as a call and go further. Cool. We're going to end it here. Feel free to ping us on Slack. Again, community help, just ping us there. I'm happy to continue forward. And thanks a lot for joining for today. Bye-bye.